Now, learn the bass catching secrets of the Bassmaster Tournament Trail Pros. Coming next on the Bassmasters, right here on TNN Outdoors.
Successful tournament bass fishing, for the most part, is a game of adjustments. Often the difference between winning and losing is a failure to make a change. Today on the Bassmasters, we're going to try to prove the point. You'll learn how pro David Ashcraft adjusts a crankbait to make it suspend and catch more bass. You'll see how Gerald Swindle adjusts his lure presentation to fish boat docks and catch fish other competitors miss. And you'll learn the winning strategy when at the last minute, the tournament waters change and everyone starts from scratch on a different lake. Now we're talking adjusting.
For the Bassmaster Virginia Invitational, 330 pros welcomed the chance to get back on Kerr Reservoir's bass-rich waters. Most had a good pre-practice on the lake known as Bugs Island near South Hill, Virginia. But Hurricane Fran ripped up the East Coast, and the best-laid bassin plans went down the drain. With flood conditions on John H. Kerr, BASS tournament officials had to change the fishing waters.
To everyone's surprise, the Virginia Invitational has moved downstream. We're on Lake Gaston at Eaton's Ferry Marina. Out on the lake is our special field reporter, Tim Miller. What's the story out there, Tim?
Bob, it's in about the condition you'd expect for an area that got a direct hit from a Category 3 hurricane. Cleanup is still continuing all over the lake. Yesterday, I went up to Bugs Island to check out the flooding situation up there, and it's ironic because the surface color is as good a watercolor as you'd ever want to see. It just looks fishy all over the lake. But the water coming out of the dam is like chocolate milk, and of course, that's what's coming into Gaston. So even though the Corps of Engineers is maintaining a constant lake level here, the lake is quite muddy compared to what it normally would be. Gerald Beck lives in Lexington, North Carolina, about 2.5 hours from here, and has fished tournaments on Gaston for over 10 years. Here's what he has to say about the conditions.
I mean, the river system that I like to fish so much is just real dirty. You can't see a spinnerbait even 2 or 3 inches under the water, so normally I fish 12 to 15 foot deep on this lake, and I just ruled it all out and just made up my mind that I was going to stay shallow. There are actually flats that run out into the lake. They're real shallow, probably under normal conditions, 5 to 6 foot deep is maximum depth that I'm fishing. And now the grass has grown over a lot of the big, huge stumps that I know where's at. And I think those fish are relating to the stumps, but yet the grass has got them covered up, but I still think that's the reason the fish are in there. And there's a lot of people that's fishing this tournament for the first time that don't know where these stumpy areas are at. And I think I've got an advantage.
Gerald Beck's strategy for fishing muddy water is to move and fish shallow. Is that the answer? We'll find out. Stay tuned. I'm Bob Cobb. The Bassmasters will be right back in a moment.
The Virginia Bassmaster Eastern Division Invitational. 3 days of rod and reel competition with $191,000 on the line. It's one of 15 qualifying events on the Bass Angler Sportsman Society's $4 million tournament trail, leading up to the Bassmasters Classic World Championship in August. The time here is late September, a time of change. Fall is coming to the Roanoke River Valley along the Virginia-North Carolina border. The season of transition, when bass change their habits and haunts from summer patterns to the venues of autumn. For the 300-plus anglers entered in the Virginia Invitational, the switch of the seasons is no reason to fret, but there are problems. This is Lake Gaston, not Bugs Island Lake, where the tournament originally was scheduled. Flood conditions close the ramps on the big lake upstream, where the water level is still 10 feet above normal. Gaston is a stranger to many of these anglers. Most had never fished here till the practice period 3 days ago. However, former world champion David Fritz of Lexington, North Carolina knows Gaston's 20,000 acres well. But under these conditions, any advantage may be limited.
You know, right now, I feel like the bite is pretty much a luck bite. Fish aren't normally where they are, and where they normally are, it's so dirty that you can't fish. So, I don't know, we're just going to go out there and go fishing and see what happens and hope we can bring it by one. I don't know if
Normally, I like to fish deeper, Carolina rig and crankbait type patterns, and in muddy water, I tend to shy away from that and go shallower. So I'm really just going down the bank flipping with a jig and throwing a spinnerbait.
Tournament tip number 1 for muddy water conditions: fish shallow. Why not fish the clearest water?
there is a little clear water in a couple of the creeks if you really look, but I think about all 300 contestants have found it. So that pretty much eliminates a lot of it.
Tournament tip number 2, dare to be different. Listen to David Ashcraft's strategy.
There's a lot of people that were beating the banks, and I just decided I wasn't going to do that, so I went out and found some deep water stuff that's still got a lot of fish on it, and they're big ones. And that's what I'm doing, is I'm fishing really deep in the muddy water.
Tournament tip number 3, skip the stuff others fish. Here's how Gerald Swindle fishes a boat dock by skipping a jig.
I skip these docks. I use like a 6'6" rod and heavy line. I use a skipping technique to make my presentation up under the dock. I try to key on areas under the dock that I feel like other anglers can't reach. It would be to my advantage to throw where a fish has never seen a bait, so when I cast, I keep my rod tip low. I use a lot of roll wrist action, place the bait on the water and let it guide itself up under the dock, which a lot of the anglers do it. It's nothing new. A lot of them use spin cast reels, though, to get the bait under there, and what that does, I feel like, as it goes through the shallow, the bait's moving so fast in this colored water, the water's so shallow, I really feel like he hears that bait going across the top of the water before he ever finds where it's gonna land. Most of my bites come immediately after the bait reaches the bottom. It's something we do at home. I love to skip docks. Those 7-pounders under there can be interesting. Yeah, if them kids can, the way I see it, on some of these docks, in the creeks, you have grass growing all around the outside that can't grow in the shade. So what you get is you get a grassy area and then you get a clean place. Those fish just patrol that clean area on the inside of that shadow, and as the bait's moving in and out of the grass on the outside up here, they get them. So what you're doing is you're skipping in the area where there's nothing, which is, you know, opposite of bass fishing sometimes, is skipping into the cover. You're skipping into nothing and swimming it out. That's why the fish are real aggressive in there. There's nothing in there. You're not working it through nothing. The only thing they see is your bait coming through.
Tournament tip number 4, key on the strike zone, the center of the biggest shadow.
There are more tournament trail tips and tactics coming up on the Bassmasters.
Thank you, Lord.
Piano.
Even if you don't win a nickel in a Bassmaster tournament trail event, the experience is worth the entry fee.
Got him. Good one.
At Bass Angler Sportsman Society tournaments, the proof is in the creel. Everyone faces the same conditions. Then it's a case of making the right decisions, the right lure presentations, and putting together a bass-catching pattern.
Thank you, Lord.
A tournament like the Bassmaster Virginia Invitational is a case in point. As in the early days of the Bassmasters Classic, no one had advanced knowledge of the lake location. From the get-go, every angler has had to figure out the situation and the bass here on Lake Gaston. Think of this tournament as a funnel of opportunity. Pour in all the tips and tactics being tried and used, and what drips out at the final weigh-in will be pure bass and know-how on how to fish a strange lake with rising muddy water conditions.
You won't keep.
Ricky Deal of Alabama is another rising young pro on the Bassmaster Tournament Trail. Here's his strategy.
When it gets tough for me on a strange lake and I got something to throw a jig by, I'm gonna throw a jig by. It's a confidence bait. I knew there were quality fish in the lake from talking to people. I hadn't caught any doing what I had been doing as far as topwater or Carolina rig. You know, at 1 o'clock yesterday when I didn't have a fish, I figured the best thing for me to do is try and get 1 or 2 good bites, you know, to stay in the hunt. And fortunately, I got 3 big bites and 1 keeper bite. I'm just fishing a 3/8 ounce lunker lure jig with a V&M crawl, and I'm just trying to set it up in the real tight places, and then I'm just popping it out once or twice, and then I'm out of there. Most of the time right now, it's just, usually they're always hitting it on the fall.
Did you make note of Ricky's tips? Tournament tip number 5, have faith in your confidence bait. And number 6, concentrate. Be a line watcher.
Tournament bass fishing, a game of adjustments. It's also a contest of emotions. Gerald Beck knows the thrill.
And the weight, we got a new leader, people. 20 pounds and 8 ounces. Let's give him a good hand. Boom. That'll play in anybody's game. Woo! Pick up 2 on the hold. People, this is incredible.
Even with a 4-ounce penalty for a dead fish, Gerald Beck takes a commanding 4-pound-plus lead over Wisconsin angler Mark Dewar on the Jersey's activewear leaderboard. Alabama pros Gerald Swindle and Ricky Deal are right on their heels. Coming up next, you'll see how lures are changed so that tournaments are won.